Volkswagen admits defeat in China, Mazda admits defeat in the United States, and is Tesla actually doing the right thing with their full self-driving transfer? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Let's start with a CNBC article from a couple of days ago about Volkswagen buying a stake in XPeng, which is a Chinese auto manufacturer. As the title states, they will jointly develop 2 new EVs with XPeng. VW said Wednesday that it has signed a deal to jointly develop 2 new electric vehicles for China with the Chinese EV maker XPeng. As part of the deal, VW will invest about $700 million in XPeng, taking a 4.99 or basically 5% stake. XPeng's US-traded shares ended up the day over 26% following the news. Under the deal, VW and XPeng will develop 2 mid-sized battery electric models based on the platform that underpins the XPeng G9, a mid-sized electric crossover SUV. In a separate statement confirming the deal, XPeng said the 2 new vehicles will also incorporate its advanced driver assist software. The new EVs, which will be branded as VWs and sold only in China, are expected to launch in 2026. VW is paying $15 per US-traded share for its XPeng stake and will receive a seat on the EV maker's board of directors, subject to regulatory approvals. Interestingly enough, Volkswagen also confirmed that its Audi subsidiary has signed a separate deal with its longtime Chinese joint venture partner, Shanghai-based SAIC Motor, to jointly develop new Audi-branded EVs for the Chinese market, so same basic deal as VW is doing. The plan is to develop new EVs in segments where Audi does not currently have entries in China, the company said. Quote, "We are leveraging the strengths of VW and our partners to create synergies to bring additional products to market faster," said Ralf Brandstätter, Volkswagen's China chief, in a statement. "In doing so, we focus on the specific needs of our customers in China. At the same time, we want to significantly optimize development and procurement costs." So on the surface, this all sounds fairly reasonable, but when you look at what's been happening to Volkswagen and Audi and, the VW group in China and how decimated they've been recently in their sales because nobody's really interested in China in purchasing VWs because they sense, number one, nobody wants to buy gas cars anymore because China's making that extremely difficult. But number two, with VW's EV cars, China and the United States also as well, although a lot of people are more comfortable with this, I guess, in the US, or maybe a little more ignorant, but certainly in China, they consider VW's interface and the way that the cars are built and, the technology as pretty mediocre at best, and Chinese consumers would rather purchase Chinese brands that are made to a higher technological standard, have better software, have better driver assistance systems, and XPeng is one of the leaders actually in driver assistance systems, so it is interesting that VW is partnering with them. I had actually thought for a while that BYD might actually purchase XPeng because XPeng is doing fairly, not well financially in China. They're struggling because there are just so many EV makers there, and it's a really difficult market. But the one thing that they really have, the intellectual property they have, at least as far as I know, because I haven't driven in one, but they have really good driver assistance features. And so, VW is getting in. They're getting a platform. They're getting a software system. They're getting an ADAS system. They're getting all of those things, and basically they can put their own shell on the top of it, call it a Volkswagen or an Audi or whatever they want to call it, although I guess Audi is working with SAIC. But anyway, Audi's doing the same thing with SAIC. They're basically buying the underlying technology, the drivetrain, all of that kind of stuff, putting their own frame on top of it and branding it as their own vehicle. And of course, what this indicates to me is that the VW group has basically thrown in the towel. They're like, we cannot compete. We can't develop a new platform fast enough and good enough for the Chinese market for people to purchase it. And therefore, we might as well just partner with these folks and make a small amount of profit, rebadging their technology as our own and basically fooling the customer. Although honestly, that's what a lot of companies do. A lot of companies do these things where somebody else makes the vehicle and then they put their own badge on top of it and make it look a little bit like theirs and add some, foo-foo stuff on the outside so that people are like, oh yeah, it's a VW and it's a higher quality car. But the underneath stuff, in this case, is going to be XPeng's. And as far as VW's actual technology, their own purpose-built EVs, it's unlikely that they are going to be in the market with those. The ID3, the ID4, the ID5, the ID7, whatever. All of those vehicles are unlikely to stay in China in the long term because they're just not selling well enough. So number one, this was actually a really good move on VW's part. They needed to do something to stem the bleeding. They're basically bleeding out at this point. But number two, it does mean that they have thrown in the towel on developing their own technology and trying to make that work in the Chinese market. From a German auto manufacturer to a Japanese one, and from China to the US, let's move to Mazda and the US. Mazda kills off MX-30 EV sales in the US again after selling just 66 cars. Ouch. This, by the way, is an electric article, and of course I will put a link to all of these in the description so you can check it out on your own. The Mazda MX-30 EV is back on the chopping block for the 2024 model year after a short reintroduction in California, wherein the car has sold only 66 units in all of 2023. Damn. Sales started slow with single digits for the first 3 months of the year, then picked up to a year high of 18 in May, woohoo, and dropped 11% to 16 units in June. Interestingly, the MX-30 was only available in California, a common thread amongst low production EVs, which help automakers comply with California's emissions rules. So if you don't know, California kind of leads the charge in terms of, oh gosh, leads the charge. Anyway, they lead the charge in terms of having very, very strict emissions policies, and it's fleet-based. So if you're Mazda, you produce a gas guzzler car, you have to then produce an EV or something that's very lightly sipping on gasoline in order to get your emissions standards balanced out for the fleet. So these are what's often called compliance cars. So they don't really care if they don't sell that many, but 66 is an incredibly low number. You can't make a profit on a vehicle where you're only making, that kind of numbers. You'd have to charge an astronomical amount of money to break even on those products, so they clearly can't keep doing this at a loss. One more paragraph from this article. Now we wait and see what Mazda will do next. The company recently gave an update on its EV plans and has an EV sales target of 25 to 40% by 2030, which is still too low to meet EPA rules, damn. But it doesn't really have any known EVs on the horizon other than a very cool looking sports car concept which might become an electrified Miata. In the meantime, it says it plans to focus on large platform PHEVs like the CX-90 and CX-70 PHEV and the CX-50 hybrid, which is not even a plug-in. So the CX-90 and 70 are plug-in hybrid vehicles, which means they have a gas engine and stuff, but they have a battery that you can actually plug in and drive 20 or 30 or 40 miles before the gas engine kicks in. So really, hybrids at this point are the worst of both worlds. You get a small battery, so you get no range, and then you also have a polluting gas engine, which also breaks down and all of that kind of stuff. So they were good when the Prius came out back around 2010 or so. They were actually a reasonable option at the time because batteries were so expensive. But in 2023, not a good option anymore. This actually makes me really sad. I am a huge fan of Mazda. I really, really love their cars. I've had a bunch, including an RX-8 with the Wankel engine, the rotary engine and everything. Love their vehicles. I think they design them really well. They're very passionate about driving and they're really good with design and everything, but they have fallen off the deep end. They just did not go electric fast enough, and I believe that they're too small of a company to be able to weather the storm. Somebody like Toyota or something is just so big that eventually, even if they're a niche player, they will survive, but I don't really project that Mazda is going to survive, and that actually makes me really, really sad. But it's their fault, they just didn't move quickly enough. And in a time of disruption, you either move fast and adjust fast or you get buried. And finally, turning to another electric article that Fred Lambert wrote, and hi Fred, this is about Tesla and their email campaign for FSD transfer. This article takes a very, very dim view of it. And of course, we can see that from the title. Tesla starts email campaign for FSD transfer, demand trigger rather than doing the right thing. So if you purchased a Tesla and you have full self-driving, you probably have already gotten this email. I got it a couple of days ago, and they basically said, take delivery of your vehicle, a new Tesla, by September 30th, and we will transfer your full self-driving from your current vehicle to the new vehicle. In the tell us what you really think paragraph here, the terms of the transfer and the email campaign make it clear that what CEO Elon Musk presented as an offer of amnesty is nothing more than Tesla pulling a demand trigger to boost sales. I will take one moment to say offer of amnesty is really, really weird. That's like if you own an illegal thing or something and you get an offer of amnesty so you can bring it in and, like if guns are illegal in your area or something, you could bring it in, right, and get amnesty and not get arrested for having that or something. That seems very odd because full self-driving is something that is very legal and has been purchased legally and people have owned it legally. So it just seems like an odd way to phrase that thing. Perhaps a one-time kindness or so. I don't know. Anyway, it just seems like a very odd way to do that. But as was pretty obvious from the time, and I think I even mentioned this, I just very briefly touched on this in a previous video, but I said this seems much more like something that Tesla wants to do right now to sell cars rather than really worrying about doing the right thing for the customer. Anyway, I'll let you read the article at your leisure if you want to. Again, check out the link in the description, but I will start with Electric's take. That's not the right thing. In other words, doing what they're doing right now, which is a very, very time-limited FSD transfer. That's vaguely disguising a demand trigger as the right thing. The right thing would be an open offer to have the paid FSD package transferred to any new vehicle until Tesla can actually deliver on its promise. Of course, that promise being that full self-driving works for real, right? That you can actually go to sleep in the driver's seat or sit in the passenger seat while the car drives you around. Now, that, of course, is Electric's take. It is, in my mind, a reasonable response to this. I take a slightly less aggressive stance on this whole thing, so your opinion might be anywhere in between or even more extreme, but basically I'm like, yeah, you paid for it and you are getting a benefit out of it now, even if it doesn't completely drive you. And it's always said in the documentation that you read that it doesn't do that, and so I never really considered that my car would necessarily be able to drive me around in the time span of owning my Model Y. In some point in the future, yes, I do expect that, and it could happen with the Model Y. Certainly if I keep it for 5 or 7 years, whatever, it's about 3 years old right now, not quite 3 years old, but if I keep it from 5 to 7 years, I think there's a really good chance that it will be able to at least drive me around without me having to be paying attention. Don't know about the legality of it driving as a robo-taxi with nobody in the car at all, but you never know. But in the meantime, as I've said in other videos, including this one very, very recently, the autonomous driving software is already a huge advantage, especially for long road trips. Even though I have to pay attention and I'm legally in charge of the car, it's a massive, massive safety aid. It really, really helps me pay attention over long periods of time. Getting older, getting tired, or I don't know, even when I was in my 20s, I used to drive with my, I'd start to fall asleep or something like that. So it can happen when you drive long distances. So the vehicle with full self-driving is much safer right now. And I consider that at least the $10,000 that I spent on it when we purchased the car was worthy and that I've gotten my money's worth out of it. So I don't have quite as negative a take about this in terms of giving us a full transfer until FSD is completed. I do, however, feel that it would be the right thing for Tesla to at least give you partial credit or charge a nominal transfer fee. So, whatever you've paid, $10,000 or $15,000, whatever it is that you've paid for full self-driving, you've owned your car for a period of time, and they sort of amortize it over time so that, like, if you resell it after a year, they give you a relatively high percentage so that you pay a small amount to do a transfer. But if you've owned the car for like 8 years, then they give you a relatively small amount and you have to pay a lot for the transfer. But let's say, you pay $2,000 as opposed to 15 to transfer full self-driving from one car to another. After a year, after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, it goes up to $3,000. You know what I'm saying? So there's this sort of sliding scale. So basically you pay a little bit more money every year to do the transfer. And so in my mind, this is much more the right thing to do, but also a demand trigger as well, because you could say, look, if you trade your car in after 3 years, you're only going to have to pay $3,000 or $4,000 to buy full self-driving for the new car as opposed to the full amount. Whereas if you keep the car for a very long time, you're going to have to pay more, right? So you can do something like that where you get a demand trigger without having to do this very, very time-limited offer. Why is Tesla making this so time limited? In my opinion, number one is that the Model 3 Highland is probably going to be coming out in the fourth quarter. Hint, hint. That's very, very likely given the timing of this whole thing. And number two, the Cybertruck is going to be coming out. Maybe first deliveries at the very end of quarter 3, but in terms of actual production and getting those vehicles, it's going to be quarter 4 before they're really putting them into place. And then, of course, in 2024, many Project Highland Model 3s, probably Project Highland Model Y, and also the Cybertruck. So it's obvious that Tesla wants to sell through stock right now, and they're concerned about the fact that people might be waiting for the next generation of the vehicles. So this is a way of competing with the Osborne effect. So yes, this does seem to be more for Tesla's bottom line than it does for the customers at this point. But this doesn't negate the possibility that we could get this one-time amnesty thing, but then Tesla could implement this strategy where they have pay a fractional amount of full self-driving to transfer it. So you don't get it for free anymore, but you can do it for a relatively lower cost. It is possible. They certainly haven't said that they won't do that. And, I'll hold out hope for that. The way that our cars are, there's no reason for us to transfer full self-driving right now. The Model Y still has plenty of life left on it. It's only got like 53,000 miles on it. So we're clearly planning on owning it for another 3 or 4 or 5 years or something before we sell it. But if it was an older car, yeah, this would actually be a pretty good deal if we were thinking about purchasing a new one at this point. All right, so that's what I got for Volkswagen, Mazda, and Tesla. What do you think about VW and Mazda's plight? And what do you think about Tesla's full self-driving transfer and the time-limited offer? Definitely let me know in the comments. While you're down there, be sure to like the video so other people can find it, and please do consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course my Twitter subscribers. Thank you all so much for helping the channel in any way that you can. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, including FSD, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.